Welcome to Off Label, a podcast brought to you by Altasciences. I'm Lisa Sanford, your host. With Off Label, we're peeling back the label on the drug development industry with candid conversations and insider perspectives. Whether you're well-versed or just curious about the drug development process, join me and other industry experts as we discuss trending research topics and advancements. A little bit about me. I'm Vice President, Business Development here at Altasciences. I've had the privilege of being here for 5 years, managing our clinical and CDMO sales teams. And I've been in the early phase industry for over 25 years. And today I'm super excited to have one of my greatest colleagues, super good friend, Kat Connors. Welcome. Let me make sure I get your title correct. So I'm going to read it for you. You're Director of Multi-Site Clinical Trial and Strategic Operations at Altasciences. All I know, people, is this means she's very valuable to our clients as well as our internal team. Super good at what she does. Very talented team that we've had there for 3 years. So today we're going to be discussing patient access and diversity in early phase clinical trials. And we're specifically looking at how multi-site approach can deliver more robust clinical trial data and make enrolling in specialty studies such as renal impairment or hepatic impairment a lot easier. So let's get to it. So Kat, welcome. Before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Lisa. Super happy to be here. So obviously you and I have known each other for many, many years. I've learned a lot from you. And as we've been working on growing our multi-site capabilities, this is super exciting to be a part of this podcast today. So a little bit about me. So I am based in Wisconsin, just outside of Madison. And my background is actually in more of the agricultural field. I did my undergrad in animal science. So I started in the clinical research space in preclinical. Worked there for about 5 years at a large CRO. And then I job shadowed a friend of mine in program management, and I became interested in the project management aspect of it, which kind of led me to go back for my master's degree and go move into the clinical space as well. So I was in the preclinical for 5 years at my old company, went into clinical for 5 years as a project coordinator, moved up through project management. I actually worked with one of our Altasciences clinics as a clinic at my old company. So that's how I kind of got the in here.
You knew us before you knew us.
I did. And I liked the company and I liked, the growth opportunities and stuff like that. So joined Altasciences about a little over 7 years ago, actually. And so about 2-3 years ago, we kind of changed our focus a little bit for working with the Altasciences clinics to multi-site. And that's, a lot of my background at my previous company was working with early phase multi-site trials. So I was super excited to join to help develop that here. And, you and your team and, just anybody who wants to talk about multi-site and the capabilities of it, I think I can talk about this stuff for hours on end at this point.
I think so. Well, it's been really, really exciting the last 3 years,
Yeah,
actually, to be able to offer our clients to go beyond the walls of Altasciences,
exactly.
whether it's enhancing the study we're already doing or whether we're going to do the follow-on study, it's been a really great advancement for us.
Yeah, it's been really fun to see it grow.
So Kat, let's get started. Maybe you could set the stage of what sponsors can expect when they enter the clinical phase.
Yeah, so it's definitely more than just, simply starting a trial, right? It's really, the first thing is really finding a partner in setting that expectation, that relationship, going through not only the planning, the design, the execution, just making sure that everybody is under the same understanding. And communication is really the most important part of that in having that partnership. A lot of CROs work very differently. You get to some smaller CROs where they've got a very niche market or targeted space. You've got the large CROs that can do a lot of everything, but sometimes they may not be the best fit. And then you've got the mid-sized CROs like us where, we can kind of blend those two together and really give that more phase one focus with kind of the pull through with the consistency between the team and the information and the expertise. So it's, to me, when you're working with like phase one stuff, it comes down to more of that flexibility and being able to easily adapt and change. And, as clients are entering that phase one stage, it's all about being flexible. And there's a lot of change happening and there's a lot of questions and, you know, certain things may come up as we're developing the design of the study that we need to pivot really quickly, and it's about being able to do that. So that's really, kind of the basic of the overview of the process is just being flexible and being able to work together to navigate that.
Right. Have you noticed that sponsors are including more parts in their study? They want to get into patients faster.
Hmm.
They're looking for like the early proof of concept.
Yeah.
So, how do you see that playing out? I mean, in our business here with early phase, it's all about speed. It's all about getting to that exit strategy faster.
Yeah.
So maybe reflect on that a little bit and also how we specialize in early phase, whereas maybe some other CROs don't, and the difference there.
Yeah, coming down to that adaptability and speed is really what I've seen kind of change in the last couple of years. Previously, you went in, you had your kind of very rigid process, right, of how you moved the molecule through. And now we're starting to see some more hybrid approaches or overlapping, which is really cool. And that's where, multi-site projects and stuff really starts to come into play here really early, in that phase one space, even before you even get to phase 1B and phase 2A. So timelines are, critical at that point, and so is cost, right? So you've got these quick studies. You want to do them as efficiently and effective as possible. We're starting to see a little bit more kind of a hybrid design of a SAD MAD approach where they've got a single dose, a multiple dose, and then they add a proof of concept or patient arm.
Okay, so like healthy volunteer
Yep.
leading into like a patient cohort.
Yeah. So instead of doing those previously as two separate studies, you've got one project now where you can do it a heck of a lot faster and you can get some early data on efficacy and just seeing how that molecule reacts sooner.
What do you think about how we handle that at Altasciences versus where you've been? I know I've worked for some other global CROs. It makes a difference, right? Where your resources are coming from.
Does.
So maybe just talk a little bit about that, how we're structured here.
Yeah. So, when you have the expertise in the early phase one, you've got the team that knows the industry, knows the needs of that, the flexibility, the speed, the adaptability of it. My previous experience was worked primarily in early phase. Sometimes I would have resourcing with late phase. And that was always a challenge, right? Because the processes are not the same. The studies are very different and they don't necessarily fit together that well. With early phase, you're working again, timeline, speed, cost, flexibility. My experience in the late phase space of resourcing is that doesn't always translate the same. So you've got these really robust processes. They're a little bit lengthier, and your team may not understand the challenges that come up with the early phase stuff.
That's right.
So it's hard to navigate that, especially when you have a couple weeks to start up a study and your timelines just keep growing, right? They can't you can't bring them in anymore because you got to follow these processes. So that's one of the cool things here is we've got the processes in place to be able to adapt and to allow some of that flexibility in managing that across different things. And we've got some mitigation strategies in place that if we've got different risks that come up, we've been through it before. Our team knows what they're doing, and they can adapt and help come to a resolution that makes sense, for the study and for the client a lot faster.
All right. So, Kat, where I see, you and your team being super instrumental, certainly in a first in human trial, where we're looking, like we mentioned earlier, to get a little bit of that proof of concept going a little quicker. So we're going to have healthy volunteer. Maybe we're going to add a cohort. Maybe instead of that, we're going to do an entire healthy volunteer study.
Hmm.
But then we're going to roll right into like a 1B, 2A, which obviously has a a patient component, patient strategy there. So, what are some of the things you're going to be proactively setting up for success here so that we can usher that, very quickly and timely as the clients are looking for?
One of the biggest things is access to that patient population, right?
Okay, so like we need renal impairment, we need hepatic impairment,
Exactly.
we need a CNS population or a derm population or something like that. Okay.
Exactly. So, a clinic that primarily focuses in healthy normal volunteers may not have that access to that special population that is, if we're expanding that. So that's where the multi-site strategy comes into effect here, which is really helpful because you can kind of spread that. You've got a wider net. You've got the experts in both the healthy population that have experience in working with that demographic or that region. And then you can even go outside of that and get even a wider region with multiple sites. You could have a population, like we've got some sites in Florida and we've got some sites on the West Coast. You can kind of spread that area out so you get a little bit more reach in that population. And what that helps with is timelines, right? So if you have more sites participating, especially if it's more of a unique population, you can get that done a little bit faster.
Yeah.
And you can kind of have that overlap where you've got a site working on the healthy, normal population. And then at the same time, you've got other sites working on their patient populations as well. So you're not doing it in a sequential order, you're just kind of overlapping it.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about the network that you guys have built and, where these sites are located, how many sites we have access to, what you're looking for in a site, a little bit of knowledge there. That would be good. Let everyone know.
Yeah. So we have a team called Site Solutions, and their primary focus is building those relationships with those external site partners. Right now, we have over 350 sites in our network, and so various, patient populations. We've got some sites that can do obesity, CNS, neurological, ophthalmology, basically anything that some of our clients need. We've got some sites in our network that have experience in that population. And our Site Solutions team spends a lot of time building those relationships. They're talking with the sites, they're onboarding them, they're building those relationships with the investigators. And then when we get proposals that come in and we have a need for that, they're able to go through that database, pull out those sites that they have that relationship with, and be able to present a solution that meets the needs of our clients pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I noticed we do have a lot of commercial sites. We have sites that can confine patients overnight. Obviously, this is very important in phase one. This is a lot of what those protocols are going to require. So I assume that's part of your selection process as well.
It is.
Maybe also talk about how your feasibility addresses the competitive landscape. Like I know if we're doing a renal impairment or a hepatic impairment trial, they're not the only client doing that.
Right.
Those are FDA or regulatory required studies. So there's a lot of competition,
Hmm.
right, for access to those patients. So what have we done to kind of mitigate that situation and produce a better result?
Yeah, we have, the kind of the top tier players, right? For especially the renal and hepatic, because those are pretty popular. And our site solutions team has even gone beyond that, right? They've built relationships with sites that may not be the key players, but they are still very, very good at what they do. And, we primarily are looking at North America between Canada and the US right now.
Yeah.
So one of the approaches that we take is working with sites that have a robust population, right? They specialize in one thing, but they also specialize in other areas too. So several of our clinics or partners that we've built, we've used them on a renal or hepatic study, and then we've also used them on a different population as well. What that does is it helps build that relationship, and we've got that standard already set in place. We know how they work, they know how we work. We've got those processes already worked out because we have experience in working with them before. And really, that engagement and the qualified investigator or qualified site reduces some of that risk, and it builds that trust between us and the site, and then be able to deliver that for the sponsor.
And you're able to really ask them the tough questions, right, during the time of feasibility, right? Because enrollment timelines or how sought after that patient population is going to affect the enrollment that's put towards a particular study, right?
It's really that proactiveness, right? That proactive communication, having that risk assessment early on, so that way if they're providing us feasibility information, we know that they can deliver that. If something does come up, we've got that partnership to kind of work through those risks as they come up together, and be able to mitigate it.
Yeah. So how are you conducting feasibility? Because, let's say we maybe are desiring only 2 sites, maybe a backup site for a third, but I know you're casting a much wider net than that. And, you're getting back some pretty comprehensive information.
Yeah.
So how are you kind of processing that? What are you sharing with the clients? How are you guys making decisions and providing solutions? Maybe you could talk a little bit about how that process goes.
So it's kind of a multi-step process. Our site solutions team is actively looking, doing database searches, looking for different networks. They've got their ear to the ground of different changes, different networks that are coming up as things evolve. So they're constantly having those proactive conversations ahead of even having an opportunity. So that way we've got those established connections. They do what's called an onboarding process. And then so they get the site basic preliminary feasibility information. We're asking them one time to confirm their capabilities. Do they have the ability to have overnight stays, a dietitian that they can work with if meals are required, that kind of stuff. So once they get through that onboarding process, that's when we consider them part of our network.
Now they're part of the network. They can be actually shown an opportunity
Exactly.
like a redacted protocol or something like that.
Yep, we've got that confidentiality agreement in place. They're part of that. And once we get through that phase 2, our site solutions team also does periodic reach outs to them. So they're engaging them kind of regularly. Then, when we have an opportunity to come in, like you said, we can reach out to them with more of the study specific information. So that's where we're collecting timelines, ballpark budgets, feasibility information. How many people do they have in their database that meets this population? How long do they think it's going to take them to recruit that? And we compile that all together once we get that from each individual site into a comprehensive, feasibility document that is shared with our clients. And from different aspects, our site solutions team looks at cost, timelines, feasibility, performance, communication. And from there, they make a recommendation of these are the sites that we would recommend that we feel is the most comprehensive and best fit for the need of the project. That could be a single site, that could be multiple sites. It just depends on the situation, but they're looking at everything and then they're providing, all of the data that we collect.
Okay, so that's interesting that you say that. So that sounds a little different
It is.
than maybe others in that others do a simulation or they'll base enrollment on previous experience.
Mhm.
Sounds like you're actually doing live feasibility. Each opportunity, you're presenting that. You guys are discussing collaboratively what the best solution looks like. So maybe elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so we don't do the traditional modeling. We actually have conversations with our clinics, and the feasibility information that we get is directly from them. And that is something that's different. We also do it prior to the awards. So clients see that we have a solution before they even award us the study. And one of the cool things that we've also offered is have conversations with these clinics, so we can build that relationship.
Oh, so a client can talk directly to a PI, to the KOL.
Exactly. And so that helps build that relationship as well. So it's not just a number, it's not just a name, it's not just a metric or something like that. Like they're talking to real people, they're getting real information, and that helps build the trust in what we can deliver and how we're going to deliver it.
Yeah. Also for the speed, right? We don't have a choice in phase 1. It's about the speed. We don't have time to perform that feasibility once there's an award sitting for us, right?
Right.
We need to really have the solution in place prior because that's basically what we're presenting and what we're aiming for.
Exactly. And startup is always one of those spots where you can get into trouble, right? Like it can
Right.
grow, and it kind of sets the stage for the rest of the study. So if we have a site list right at award, that means we can hit the ground running and we don't have to wait.
I've seen some feedback from our sites. When they look at protocols, they're very good at looking like an inclusion exclusion criteria and
Mhm.
making suggestions that would help enrollment. So, what's your experience been with that? Sort of the collaboration with the site?
Yeah, kind of the same thing with the feasibility. Because of that relationship that we have with our sites, we engage them early. And since they're the ones that are very knowledgeable in the operational and the expertise of these, we take their feedback, and help use that to maybe improve or develop the design for the study. And a lot of times that can reduce some of the risk of enrollment issues or other problems, screen fails, all of that stuff pretty early on, because we can kind of identify some of those areas where it might be a little bit more tricky to find the population and have those conversations early, where we can design a project with our client that works for everybody and that the sites are able to do, that the sponsor, it meets their needs. And then we can just have that, again, proactive communication as early as possible, because it's always tough when you get into a recruitment challenge and then you're kind of having to work through it from behind the scenes kind of thing, or not as early on as possible.
Yeah, I think with the speed of some of our studies, especially like when you're adding a patient cohort on the end of a first in human, for instance, that has to be set from the get go, right? Because healthy volunteer recruitment and patient recruitment are two totally different things, right? Maybe walk us through that process a little bit.
So it's something where the healthy volunteer is very structured, right? So you've got cohort dosing, you're bringing a bunch of people in, they're all dosing at the same time. Patient population is a little bit different. You're finding the one offs, right? You bring them in as you find them. And operationally, that means a couple different challenges. You're a little bit more structured with the healthy volunteer. You know when you're dosing, you know when your last visit is going to be, you know when the samples are going to be ready, kind of more of that structured timeline. Whereas in a patient population, you have more of a range, right? So you can, like, we're starting on this date and we're targeting to end by this date, but then the dates in between are kind of more fluid, right? And especially when you have multiple sites working with the same goal, you could, with a competitive approach, you could have one site that, like, is ready to go, and it's a little bit more important to make sure that all of the sites are as ready to go within a short window as possible. So that way each site has their own opportunity and has an equal opportunity to find their population.
Yeah. So I think that's perfect. Like, talk about some startup there. Like, talk about, every client wants to know how fast can you contract these sites? Do they use a central IRB? Is that in our control?
Hmm.
Do they have to contract to those sites? So maybe talk about how we orchestrate all that together.
Yeah. So that's something that we're incredibly flexible on. And it's a good conversation to figure out what the needs are of the client, what we can provide, what they want. So one of the things you mentioned was contracting. With some of our sites, we have an established service agreement already in place. So the contracting process is super easy. So we've got all of the long legal language already agreed to, and then it's more of the study specific terms that we can contract with. Also, because of the established relationships that we have with these sites between our contracts team and their contracts team as well, they can get those done pretty easily. Budgeting, same thing. We've got a template. We do have, in some of our sites, we've got the historical data already from what their budgets have been in the past. And we can kind of use that as a starting point. So we're not starting from scratch each time. And so that process goes really, really quickly and really smoothly, which again helps with the startup timelines. In my previous life, contracts were always on the critical path. You were always down to the wire. And I don't see that here, because it's something that we've proactively established and worked that through pretty early on, so that's not part of the problem. The IRB submissions is another one. So our preference is, if we can, to do a central IRB submission.
So you're taking like full control. You're doing this on their behalf. Okay.
We do all of the protocol level submissions. So once the protocol is finalized, the informed consent form is finalized, we take that full responsibility to make sure that that central IRB submission is completed and work with the sites to do their site submissions as well. So the timelines, again, because we've got all of those big documents already approved, IRB submissions usually take, a couple of weeks to get everybody through, or even the site reviews in a couple of days. And then, it's just making sure that we stay, again, we take care of the protocol level submissions so none of that gets missed. It's not a burden on the sites to do that. And then they just need to do their submissions as needed.
Cool. Talk a little bit about your project management team, because not just any project manager, I'm sure, can manage these studies, right? So, if we're doing a hybrid between Altasciences and outside external sites or total external sites, so maybe talk a little bit about the team that supports.
I mean, our project management team is awesome. They are top notch. As somebody who came from the project management team, our team is just amazing. We've actually had several of our clinics give extremely amazing kudos to some of our project managers because their communication style is amazing. A lot of our team comes from a very diverse background, so they know the importance of communication, both internally, externally, with the clients, with the sites, and especially when you add multiple layers to it, right? It's that consistency in communication. So our project management team, we do have some very experienced PMs that, have worked with multi-sites before. Some of them have even come from a site background or a client background where they've worked across multiple sites. They know the differences between working with a healthy normal volunteer site and a patient population site. They know what questions to ask the sponsor to kind of see what their needs are, what deliverables that they need, what data they're looking for. And then also from the site perspective, just making sure there's consistency across our data manager, our clinical research associates, our sites, getting the information from our sites to be able to share that with the sponsor so that way we can make sure that we're on track or identify, any risks that come up as early as possible. And then that seamless communication between building that relationship with the client and the sites as well, and just making when I talk about our site management team, it's really led by the PM.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like the PM is point of contact for the client.
Yeah.
They're instrumental in keeping internal, external clinics together,
Yep.
as well as the cross-functional team.
But it's really a team effort, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
The site management team includes so many people, and it's making sure that everybody has that consistent information and that you're getting it when you need it. So yeah, our PMs do an excellent job at that. They're top notch.
That's great. So I know we've kind of brushed on this already, but when do you think multi-site really comes into play? Like, what type of studies do you think it's a really good strategy for? Or, what are some of the trends that you see now in the development space that are really lending themselves to this being the solution that they have to have?
So I'm seeing it a lot earlier now. Like I mentioned before,
They want the data, right? They want proof of concept.
exactly. They want that data early.
Yep.
So a really cool one we had recently, and this kind of blends the flexibility with the multi-site approach. We had a client that came to us and the project was a single and multiple ascending dose study. So they wanted the very basic, healthy normal volunteer SAD MAD design. They started to see really positive early signals. And then, kind of about halfway through or so, they started asking about, is it possible that we can maybe add a patient arm? So
we had already started.
We had already started. It was a completely different design change. We had, the healthy normal volunteer, that was the standard for it. And then they said, can we do this? And we're like,
Yeah, by the way.
yeah, we can. So it was, we already had some sites in our network that we could engage pretty early. They were able to provide us feasibility data. We were able to amend the protocol, pivot really quickly, get all of that patient portion of it done while the healthy volunteer project was still going.
No stopping,
Nope.
no delay, no overextending of the timeline.
Nope. It basically just was an add on. It was a cohort that they added on.
Wow. So that recruitment went on within the timeline of the study that was already decided upon?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It did extend it out a little bit just because, the patient arm took a little bit, but it was shorter than doing a whole nother study, right? So it added on by maybe a couple of weeks.
Was it more than one site that we had to add, or?
It was only one site. So it became a single site to a double site project. So we were able to, it was a pretty small patient population. So we were able to pivot pretty quickly and add that on with a very minimal impact to the overall timelines. And they were able to get that data for their investors and for their future.
Yeah. Well, that certainly enhanced the data package, I'm sure. So that's what everyone's looking to do.
It was cool.
So, how would you talk to a client's experience, sponsor's experience? What are they going to find that's different about a multi site trial and placing that, getting that off the ground compared to, a single site, healthy volunteer, all contained, within a CRO?
You've got a lot more factors at play, obviously. You've got a lot more data, you've got a lot more sites, you kind of exponentially grow that. With that, the risk also increases, and having those proactive conversations early on to work through the challenges or identify any challenges that might come up, have mitigation strategies in place for if they do, or early signals to see those coming up. And also, the biggest factor is the consistency. When you have multiple sites that are working on the same goal or the same project, you add a lot of variability into that, and making sure that we have that consistent message, that the sites have the same parameters to develop that data. One of the cool things that we do for multi-site projects is what we call an investigator meeting. And it's a training that we do for all of the sites all at the same time. They get the same messaging. The data manager is there. The CRAs contribute to it. We have all of the sites on. The sponsor is there. It's just, instead of having, all of these separate meetings to share the same data, we do it all at once. And it also helps build that relationship because they know who the team is, they know who the client is, they can ask questions, they can hear the other sites ask questions that they might have. And they also kind of get to know the group that they're working with and be able to start that off on the right foot from the beginning.
What about comparing the experience that we give clients here through our multi-site? What do you think some of the differences are between coming to a group like us, very focused, early phase, versus maybe the larger CRO that's, impressively, they're doing global registration trials for sure.
Hmm.
I know at some point we'd love to congratulate our clients and send them on their way as well. But what's some of the differences that you're seeing there?
Yeah, it's the biggest difference in having worked at a large CRO to here is that speed and that flexibility, right? When you get into those larger CROs, late phase, you can get into some of those very fancy, expensive late phase studies. Those take priority, right? And that means some of those, smaller early phase studies that are just as important, if not more important, do get deprioritized a little bit more. And if clients are seeing inconsistencies in communication or delays in answering questions or things aren't clear, that's usually a sign that, something is deprioritized to something else. And, I've heard it multiple times where it's just like, I'm a small fish in a big sea kind of thing. And I mean, honestly, we take the opposite approach. We add that communication and importance like right away. And unfortunately, a lot of it happens pretty often where smaller studies get deprioritized in the grand scheme of things. We don't have that late phase capability. So you're not competing with anybody else.
You're not competing.
You got the phase one team, you've got the expertise, you've got our full attention.
So you've got the priority.
And, it's really that you don't get pushed on that priority list because this is our focus. This is what we're good at. This is what we do. And especially looking at the ClinFarm package, right? So you're looking at that bulk of projects for those different needs that you need to meet. We can do it faster. We're leaner. We don't have those processes in place that don't make sense, that they're a little bit too rigid. And so we're built for the flexibility. And, like I mentioned before, we can pivot on a dime too. And
It sounds that way.
things come up and we got to make it work.
Especially if mid-through conduct, we need to add patience.
Yes.
That's definitely a good example of pivoting on the dime for sure.
Yeah. So, it's really working with that smaller organization. The thing that I've noticed is like all of our teams have that sense of accountability and ownership in the projects that they're working on. It's not just, a checkbox or they're not going through the motions kind of thing. They're really engaged in owning and proud of the work that they do. And that translates to our clients, right? And meeting the needs for them. So yeah, you've got the team that you get because we're really good at that phase one focus.
Well, those sound like green flags. So I know we don't want to just talk about red flags, right? We don't just want to talk about everything that, could go awry. So maybe keep building on that. What do you think are some of the other really positive attributes that we're bringing here to these early studies?
Yeah. I mean, it goes beyond the data stuff, right? So you've got the data, obviously, you've got the numbers and the values and all of that stuff, but it really comes down to more of the relationship. Are you working with the people that you should be working with? Because you're spending a lot of time together. And, if you don't have the right fit, that will create some challenges.
That's an interesting point, the right fit. So what I'm hearing is maybe if we're not the right organization for a study, we're also going to say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And we will. Like, if it's beyond our capabilities or our expertise, we don't have a problem in saying that. It doesn't mean that we can't be a fit in the future or, somewhere down the road, but we're not going to take something that we don't think that we can deliver and do well.
Right. And I'm sure you're counting on that network to really inform,
Yeah.
how successful they're going to be, right? So that we can share very transparently
Right.
what it's going to take to get that study done.
Right. We want our clients to be successful too. And if that doesn't fit with our ability to, we're going to say that because that's ultimately what we want out of that. It's that, again, partnership. I've said that a lot during this, but it comes down to just having the expertise, being able to manage the study well, being able to deliver for our clients. We want what's best for them. So whatever solution that ends up being, or if it ends up being that we're not the right fit, that comes into play too.
What if a client already has site relationships or has a preferred site? Are we open to entertaining that? And how do we approach that?
Absolutely. We actually have a client that we're working with currently that brought us sites that they have relationships with. So we are doing the contracting for them, the site management of it.
Okay.
We're taking their feasibility, their relationships, and we're building off of that.
You're making it easy because I was just going to ask, what if clients want to do contracting direct to the site versus Altasciences being the contract holder?
Completely open. Yep.
Not a problem. Do you prefer one over the other?
Yeah, it really comes down to the preference on what's the easiest or what's the best fit. With us contracting sites, we do need to do the qualification ourselves. So if that is something where, we're starting to see something where we may not have enough time to do that, that's a conversation that we've had with some clients before. We've also discussed having them contract with the sites and we make the payments. We've worked through some stuff like that. So we fit a couple different situations based on clients' need, comfort level, timelines. We've had a lot of flexibility and just making sure that we can find a solution that works for everybody. Like I mentioned previously, some of our sites we work with on multiple different studies, a couple different therapeutic areas. So their billing for us is really easy because they can just send, multiple invoices or direct billing to us for multiple projects. So having that established relationship helps as well. And we've worked with another site of ours where we've actually flagged some concerning financial stuff on their end where there was some fraud going on. And we were able to actually stop it and save the site from losing some money on it. So again, comes back to the relationship with our PMs and our sites is really strong and
Yeah.
is all about communication and partnership.
And I assume that, if we do take that onus on ourselves, then that provides us the most leverage
Hmm.
to managing the sites or, making sure enrollment numbers are where they need to be and timing is the way it needs to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's just easier and smoother, I'm sure.
Yeah. We have some performance metrics that we keep track of, and especially with making sure that we stay within budget or, if we're starting to see that we're getting close to that we can have those early conversations as soon as possible. Obviously, what we budgeted previously, we want to stay within that. We don't want to keep doing change orders or like surprising costs that come up. So any of those early conversations that we can have both with clients and sites, we can leverage that more.
Yeah. So is this what you call the non-data stuff?
This is the non-data stuff.
Okay. So for those of you out there that don't know the cat super well, she does talk about the non-data stuff. So maybe describe a little bit about a non-data topic because obviously this is super important too, regardless of who the site is, right? So walk me through those a little bit.
It comes down to the relationship aspect of it. That's more of the soft skills, right? Like the non-hard data stuff. Being transparent, reliable, consistent. They're not measurable. You can't produce them in any sort of like metric or anything like that, but they're just as important to how a trial runs and how successful a trial is going to be. So you can have, the best study design, the best protocol, and if communication breaks down or the team isn't aligned, it doesn't make a successful trial, right?
Right.
So it comes down to that consistency, communication, making sure that everybody has the same goal in mind and that we're moving continuously through the project with that goal in mind, just keeping things efficient and on track. So yeah, I use the term non-data stuff quite a bit.
What about quality or the advantage of like integrated services on our end? So, these sites are obviously slotting in. So how does that play into the client's favor as well?
We have a couple different checks for quality. We have our CRAs that are doing, the quality monitoring on site, checking, making sure they're doing the source data review and verification. We have the project managers that are working with the sites, making sure that we're staying up to date on more of the progress. And then even way, way, way before that, our QA team is involved as well, and that we do a very robust site qualification. So not only are we looking at can the site perform the protocol as they plan, but we're looking at does the site meet our standards? Are they an extension of Altasciences? Because ultimately, they're a representation of us.
Exactly.
We expect the same.
And we're following their SOPs, correct? Like we're not making a site who's used to following their SOPs conform to us, correct? Like we're
Right.
allowing them to do the conduct as they know best,
Yeah.
right? Because I guess we're inviting errors if we demand that they do it our way. But
Yeah.
through the qualification, we're ensuring that their SOPs, their quality standards are on par with what we would do at our own site.
Exactly.
Is that kind of our benchmark there?
Yep. So they've got the processes, the SOPs, the systems in place to be able to perform the clinical conduct. If we have something that we're expecting them to follow, then we'll train them on that. So we're not expecting them to follow our SOPs, but we will do through that investigator meeting, we will do a training on expectations. So monitoring expectations, visit expectations, data entry. We've got the guidelines, the documents, and all of that stuff in place. So we give the sites the information that we expect consistently across the board, but where we're able to, we let the sites follow their processes, because we don't want them to do something different because then you're just inviting more risk for errors. Same thing with even like templates, if possible, we would like them to use their templates if they have them. If they don't have them, we have templates available that they can use. So things like the delegation of authority log or protocol deviation listing or, stuff like that where they may not have those documents and we have those available for them to use. However, if they do have them, we want them to use what they're familiar with.
Right. Okay. That's great. And then we do need to approach this subject because there's not a client out there that isn't concerned with finances.
Right.
And nobody wants scope creep. Nobody wants a dreaded change order. These are not things that we want. So, how are you monitoring the financial support and making sure that we're good stewards of our clients' budget? They're often very specific at this stage, right?
Yeah.
Like they're allocated a specific amount of money to accomplish this.
Right. Yeah. We know our clients don't have unlimited funds. We also don't like change orders either. We'd like to avoid them as much as possible. So knowing how much it's going to cost upfront is really key. That's where we get, some of those established relationships with these sites. We can set a pretty accurate quote or benchmark on what a study is going to cost. But also, we have that discussion with the site as well. So, we do get some of that preliminary budget information during the feasibility stage before we even provide a full budget to our clients. And, as the study progresses, we're checking against that stuff all the time. So, we're constantly monitoring. We've got X amount of screen failures in the budget. We are 50% of the way there with, however much time left. And we're tracking to see if we're progressing a little bit faster than we thought, or if we're good, or, we're trying to have those conversations earlier if possible. So that way we're not coming to a client and being like, oh, we're over budget. We need a change order for X amount of money, because we don't like that. And obviously, clients, that's not a great way to do business either.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I can't believe it. The time has flown. We are coming to the end of our talk here, Kat.
I
So
told you I could talk about this forever. I warned you.
yeah, and me too, of course. So, you've shared some really great insights today. I think you've given us a couple of good examples. So maybe just if you had a crystal ball, let's talk about the future. What are you seeing on trend? What do you think the industry is heading towards with respect to these still early phase patient trials?
I think it's going to be happening, a lot more frequently and a lot faster. I think the need is going to be there where timelines are going to be just as important as cost, as getting the data. I mean, this is going towards that efficiency mark more and more. And I think there's going to be more of a push for having multiple sites participating earlier in the molecule development. And, the complexity obviously is going to expand as well. There's more specialty populations, specialty assessments, all of that kind of stuff that's going to get added as well. Not that I have a crystal ball, but that's kind of where I'm starting to see the trend going.
And I think the nature of the molecules too, right?
Yeah.
Kat, if you would agree, because some of the mechanism of action, I'm not sure we would actually see an effect from a healthy volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we automatically have to go into a patient population.
Right. Yep.
All right. Well, today's been so interesting. I've absolutely enjoyed having you as a guest on Off Label. It's so incredible. I don't know if you had any other closing words for everyone.
Just thank you for having me. This was an awesome conversation. Like I said, I could talk about this stuff for hours. I love what I do. I love where Altasciences is growing and the changes and the growth from it. And it makes me really excited. And obviously, you and I we feed off of that excitement together. So
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
Fantastic couple of years building our site solutions for our clients. Super valuable. I know it's really enhanced our clients' development programs.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to thank you for being a guest. We'll look to have you come back on soon, Kat.
Can't wait.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Yeah, thank all of you for tuning in. This is Off Label. I'm Lisa Sanford. We've enjoyed speaking to you. Stay tuned for more episodes of Off Label. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.